Heyo, guess who's in trouble because she had some caffeine this morning? Woo! Oh, this past week, me and my best friend went to this place called Horror Vibes Coffee, and it was really cool. It was this totally horror-themed little coffee shop, and the drink that I got was Annabelle-themed. It was called the Annabelle Latte, I think, and the O is for oat milk because I am a non-dairy queen. And then my friend got this drink called the May Queen, which I'm kind of jealous because her drink was so good. It was like this matcha drink with this sort of sweet foam on top, and they put little flower petals on it. It was great. But the thing about me is that I cannot have too much caffeine, otherwise I will start vibrating. I will cause an earthquake. So I've been kind of sipping on it throughout the week since we went, but I've had about this much of it already this morning, and so if you couldn't tell, I'm talking a little bit faster, which is perfect. Now I'm high energy to talk about everything that I watched in the month of June. Also, as a lot of people on this channel enjoy, this is going to be completely unscripted, if you couldn't already tell that. So if you're new here, first I start with all the TV shows that I've been watching, and then I talk about all the non-horror movies that I watched. Then I get into all my horror rewatches, and then all my new watches of old horror. This month I finally watched The Hills Have Eyes remake, and then I get into all the new horror releases of the month that I watched. Now, of course, my dear cult members already knew that, and yes, oh, what? Cult members? If you're new here, okay, allow me to explain. My subscribers are not just subscribers here, they are my devoted little maggots. My little children of the darkness, my little unholy ruler worshippers, me being the unholy ruler, and we have a great time on this channel pretending that we are a real cult that accepts blood sacrifices. And by blood sacrifice, I do mean you just simply click the subscribe button. And then, and click the notification bell because then you'll never miss our next meeting. Okay, with that out of the way, we can get into TV shows, and I don't have that much to talk about because I'm still trying to watch through Bones. Now I'm like halfway through season 7. I kind of took a big break because I ended up watching the entirety of Wizards of Waverly Place. I started listening to the Rewatch podcast that they do, and honestly, it's not very good, but it's just really nostalgic for me. So I did watch the entirety of Wizards of Waverly Place this past month. I had started it towards the end of May, I think, and I really enjoyed myself. Honestly, it's a great show. I also watched the very first episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I'm in love with that show already. So definitely going to continue on with that one. And then lastly, for TV shows, I tried to watch the first episode of From because I've heard really, really excellent things about it. However, I did not make it through the first episode, and I really need to go back to it and potentially just start it all over. Let me just tell you a story, okay? There was some night this past month where I had taken an edible and just nothing felt good. You know how sometimes when you're sick and like no food tastes or smells good? It was like that, except that nothing that I put on was doing anything for me. I tried to start, I think, 3 different movies and From, and I just was not feeling a single one of them. So we're gonna try again on another day with a sober Kylie, I think. That's unfortunately gonna do it for all the TV shows that I've been watching because when I tell you, I was just straight binging Wizards of Waverly Place. I think that might have given me some brain rot. I don't know, maybe that's why I couldn't find anything that I liked that night. And then I've also been binging Bones, so I'm gonna try to have like 2 shows going at once so I have more to talk about because Bones, I still have like over 4 seasons left of it to watch. So I'll try to get through From. I'll get back to you next month. Now moving on to all the non-horror movies that I watched, starting with Still, a Michael J. Fox documentary. This is about Michael J. Fox and his Parkinson's diagnosis and sort of how his career changed since the diagnosis. It is such an excellent documentary. It's on Apple TV. I watched it and cried, and then I bothered my dad to watch it for like the next week. I was like, remember, you still have to watch this documentary. So he did. He watched it with my mom. And it worked. He eventually did watch it with my mom, and I think that he said he cried too. I just love Michael J. Fox because Back to the Future is one of my favorite movies of all time, period. When I watch that movie, I can basically recite every single line of dialogue. I'm sure it's very annoying for anyone I've ever showed that movie. And I think Parkinson's is something that in general the public is not very educated on. I didn't really know too much about the disease. And he has a particularly bad case of it where he was diagnosed at 29, which is really, really uncommon. It's most common, I believe, in men older than 72 or something. So it's also this really great story about like the resilience of the human spirit. It's probably exactly what you'd be expecting from something like that, but so worth the watch. Just give it a go. go. Up next, I finally watched Jawbreaker, the dark comedy from 1999, the year that I was born. And speaking of the year that I was born, actually, my birthday is coming up on July 6th. And all that I want for my birthday is for donations for my next short horror film, Liked. You can find the GoFundMe linked right down below, and you can also find my last short horror film that I released last year on my birthday. Oh, Somnum is about to turn 1. Oh, cute. So you can watch that, and then maybe that will kind of up your confidence in me, give you a little more faith as to what I could do with a little more money for the next one. So again, those things will be linked down below. I'm about to turn 24, as is this movie, Jawbreaker. So Jawbreaker is 100% the blueprint for Mean Girls that would come out 5 years later. It follows this mean group of girls as they accidentally kill their best friend, and then they spend pretty much the rest of the movie trying to cover that up. It was not the movie of my dreams. It was not everything that I was hoping it would be. I'm really bummed because it is such a cult classic, and it stars so many wonderful people that we love, like Rose McGowan and Judy Greer, and oh my god, who is the girl from Urban Legend? Rebecca Gayheart. Oh my god, and Marilyn Manson and Pam Grier. Yeah, it's got a pretty crazy cast, and I think it was only made for like a little over $1 million or something. I've been on a bit of a 90s bender this past month or so, and it just did not quite scratch that itch. I do completely see why so many people love that movie, but the comedy in it didn't really work for me, which is weird because I love a good dark comedy, and I find Rose McGowan to be hilarious, especially as like Tatum in Scream, you know? And usually I find Judy Greer to be really funny too. She is a wonderful comedian. But something about this maybe was like a little bit too low budget for my taste. I'm not really sure. No, I don't think that was it, because that same kind of tone I feel like you can find in movies like Dazed and Confused. I feel like Halloween and Carrie sort of have kind of a similar feeling, but I can't quite put my finger on it. I think really for me, this movie did start to feel kind of slow at points. Like there was not enough meat in the story. I kind of felt like some of the acts were a little bit disjointed from one another. It just overall did not really get my juices flowing, which I'm really bummed about. I ended up giving it like a 2.5 out of 5, so it kind of just goes right down the middle. A little bit below average. I wouldn't say that I would not rewatch it though, because I would hope that maybe I would like it a little bit more the second time around. Now next up is a movie that truly needs no introduction, but that would be the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. Now this is a whole story, okay? What a month that I have had. So I went on a double date to go see the SpongeBob SquarePants movie at the Greek Theater. If you didn't know, the voice of SpongeBob, Tom Kenny, is in a band. I guess that they perform in venues around LA pretty frequently. I didn't know this, and it was kind of last minute that they got announced to perform before the movie here. And the event was amazing. Right off the bat when we walked in, they had a little photo op with the Krabby Patty car. So me and my best friend Natalie ended up taking a picture in it. That was super cute. And then while we were down there, we just went down to take the picture. We ended up meeting Tom Kenny. You guys don't understand. SpongeBob started the year that I was born in 1999. Some of my earliest memories are around like 4 years old in my old house before we moved away from Glendale. And literally my first memory of ever watching anything in this world was SpongeBob. Like that show has been so formative in my life. To meet the voice of SpongeBob, and when we went up to him too to take the picture, he was like, "Let's do this," like in the SpongeBob voice. I nearly had a conniption. Like I couldn't really speak. Like I don't know. I usually don't get starstruck like that, but I guess you never really know how you're gonna act in a certain moment. And I just was smiling like an idiot. If you couldn't tell, this picture of me is terrible, but like there I am with SpongeBob, so who cares? And then his music was so good. I highly recommend going to see Tom Kenny in the High Seas. SpongeBob himself literally got down into the pit. Like he was in the crowd singing Best Day Ever, and it honestly was. It kind of was like the peak of my last month. It was so good. It was so jazzy and so fun, and I danced so much. And then they showed the movie, and it was such a blast. The crowd was so interactive. Listen to the reaction, especially from me, when Plankton was defeated.
What's going on here?
But most of all,
Hey, settle down. Take it easy. What the scallop?
I'm Goofy Goober!
yes, the answer to what you may be wondering is yes, I was drunk. But I think I probably would have been that rowdy anyways because the crowd, the mob mentality really swept me up. Mob mentality and SpongeBob. You ever thought that you'd hear those two words in the same sentence? Okay, anyways, let's move along. So the next thing that I rewatched would be Into the Spider-Verse. That was, of course, to prepare for Across the Spider-Verse, which I don't really have many words for. I think that it is possibly the pinnacle of cinema. Like, I think that it is going to be remembered as a turning point for animation especially, but I think that it is going to permanently change the industry. I don't quite know how yet, but it's like one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. If you are any type of artist, then this is something you need to see in theaters. This will change the trajectory of your life. Like, I don't even know. Now, everyone is giving it a perfect 5 stars. For a minute there, I don't know if it still is, it was the highest rated movie on Letterboxd ever. Out of every movie ever. And I think with entirely good reason. Like, that does not shock me at all. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars just because I ended up feeling a little bit of the length of the movie. It's like 2.5 hours long. I did kind of start to feel like the ending of the movie dragged. Also, the villain is just like not there for pretty much the entire second act. So they're doing a lot of character building and stuff, which I love all of that, but I did ultimately start feeling the length. And then it is a part 1, so it didn't really feel like a complete movie to me. And I knew that going into it. I wish that it felt like it had a little bit more of a resolution, but I understand the whole point is that like it's not gonna have one because it's a part 1. And the only reason why that's kind of a complaint is that I do worry that they are not gonna limit this to just a trilogy. I would really hope so because it seems like they've had a lot of artistic integrity with these movies up to this point, but I could see them eventually making more and not just containing it. In which case, I don't really appreciate that this is not a self-contained movie, because you'll find with any other Marvel movie, besides maybe Infinity War, but I would even argue that Infinity War does feel self-contained, that most other superhero movies, regardless of how they fit into a giant overall storyline, they are self-contained. This one didn't really feel that way, and I think it's just a personal preference that I'm not really a fan of that. Unless they maintain their integrity and they keep it to a trilogy. But we will see. I mean, like, I wouldn't be opposed if this trilogy ended and then they, like, started another trilogy or, like, did something entirely separate, or they brought Miles Morales to live action or something, because he's my favorite Spider-Man, like, ever. I love him. But God, what an experience. What, like, one of the best films probably ever made, to be honest. Moving on, I did also watch the 2 Wizards of Waverly Place movies/specials. Wizards of Waverly Place, the movie, is definitely a movie, and it's not that great, but it's fun, it's nostalgic. Alex vs. Alex is, I think, like a 62-minute long special, so it's not quite a movie, but I mean, I think that constitutes as like a short film. It feels like a movie, more or less, really. It's terrible. It's so bad. I had never watched it. Like, I think that I had kind of grown out of Disney Channel by that point, because 2013, that's when I was like starting freshman year of high school. So by that point, I was probably watching like The Vampire Diaries, Pretty Little Liars, you know, more sexy stuff. I had moved on. And it was so bad. I cannot accept that that is the last piece of Wizards of Waverly Place content we will ever get. We need to run up another reunion ASAP. And I think that they're kind of gearing towards it with the Rewatch podcast. I think that that's honestly the end goal. So we'll see. But wow, what a stinker. Now up next would be the brand new comedy No Hard Feelings, starring Jennifer Lawrence, who also produced it. This is about a woman who desperately needs a car. So she finds this Craigslist ad that these rich people have posted that if they can find a woman to date their son, they will give her a car. This was a 3-star movie for me, and I feel like it was kind of intentionally made that way. I've talked about this at length, probably starting since like last year, but I do feel like nature is healing. We're getting so many of those movies in theaters these days that are really just for the entertainment value. They're not really trying to do anything else. They're purely just popcorn movies that you go to see as something to do during the weekend, you know, a little dinner and a movie action. And then by the time that you get home, or honestly by the time you get to your car, you forget about it. The movie is designed in that way. It's a very stereotypically structured, sort of just rom-com comedy, broad comedy, I don't know. It's a 3-star movie to me, and that's okay. It's just trying to entertain you, and it did that. The movie is almost 2 hours long somehow as a comedy, but it kept my attention the entire time. I did not feel the length of it. I was entertained, but that was the only thing the movie really did for me. It didn't do anything beyond that. I will say though, it would have gotten a higher score for me if it had actually been funnier. I was very, very shocked at the fact that I found the younger man to be funnier than Jennifer Lawrence in the movie. I think it was just simply because of the character he was playing and like the material that each of them were given. There are a few scenes where she cracks me up. I think that Jennifer Lawrence is a hilarious comedian. I just don't think the writing of this movie was really that good for her. And I would say that the main problem with the writing is that this is supposed to be a raunchy comedy. That's like the subgenre of comedy that it's listed as, I believe. And raunchy comedies are supposed to be really sexual and like there's nudity and it's just crazy. There are a few scenes where they took it there, but I can really only think of 2 of them. For the most part, it was like they thought that a raunchy comedy could just mean that they had Jennifer Lawrence say the word f a few times in a single sentence. And it's like, oh my god, curse words. So I think that that is why a lot of the humor fell flat for me, because I just didn't feel like they were really taking it there as far as a raunchy comedy. To my memory, a proper raunchy comedy would be something like The Hangover, right? Or, oh my gosh, the absolute pinnacle, the granddaddy of raunchy comedies would have to be Fired Up. Now that is a movie that takes it there. Anyways, the last non-horror movie of the month would be Wes Anderson's Asteroid City. I saw this a couple of days ago with my dad, actually, because he really wants to like expand his palette, and God bless him. Because Asteroid City is such a weird movie, as many Wes Anderson movies are, but as you can tell, it is one of the most gorgeous movies ever made, and it's kind of hard to explain what this is about without giving too much away. So I will just say that it involves a group of very eclectic people who are quite different from one another being stuck all in Asteroid City. I loved it. To me, it was like a 4 out of 5 star film just because I was kind of feeling the length and there were certain things that I feel like could have been trimmed out and I don't know, just would have helped the pacing along. But that's sort of a moot point because Wes Anderson is such an auteur and everything he's doing is just kind of to service his vision. So I don't know that it's necessarily fair for me to be like, well, I would have trimmed this out to like help the pacing for me to like maintain my attention. I don't really feel like that's a fair criticism. That's just kind of like why I would have enjoyed the movie more. I also really haven't seen too many Wes Anderson films. The only other ones I've seen are Fantastic Mr. Fox, Moonrise Kingdom, and I think I saw Isle of Dogs when that came out, all of which I do not remember. I saw Moonrise Kingdom and Fantastic Mr. Fox probably when I was a kid, like at least a decade ago, so I'm definitely due for a rewatch of those. Asteroid City really made me want to check out his entire filmography. I also love how deeply, deeply unserious this man is. Asteroid City was so funny, and it even got my dad laughing, and he's kind of picky with a comedy that he enjoys. I don't think that overall he really enjoyed the movie. I think he gave it like a 2.5 out of 5, but he was probably laughing more than I did, and I was laughing a good amount. It was a blast. I just forgot how funny his movies are, so I'm really excited to check out all of his other ones. Now, what the people have been waiting for, let's talk about all the horror movies that I watched in June. Starting with all of my rewatches, we can kick that off with Mayhem. Mayhem is such a good dark comedy. It's honestly one of my favorites ever. Stephen Yeun is the lead, and Samara Weaving is his co-lead, basically, and it takes place in this office that has been quarantined due to a virus outbreak. But this virus lowers your inhibitions, so it basically strips everyone down to their most primal animal instincts. It's so good. It's like this totally anti-corporate, anti-capitalist America movie in like the rawest sense that it can be. It is fantastic. There is so much like brutal action, which is my favorite. I love slapstick gore, and this movie has a ton of it. I just love super theatrical, over-the-top, violent action. And of course, when you put 2 of the hottest people in the world world in a movie, I'm gonna love it. So yeah, ended up loving that one even more on a second watch. I feel like I'm just gonna love it more and more every time that I see it. My next rewatch would be The Final Girls. If you couldn't tell, I'm trying to sort of revisit all the dark comedies that I know I like. The Final Girls is about a group of people that get stuck in what is essentially a Friday the 13th movie. So the whole thing is like a parody on Friday the 13th, and so it makes a lot of commentary on slasher tropes and stuff. And it does so, I think, in a pretty good way. Like, it feels pretty relevant and aware of the genre, but still a lot of the humor falls flat. I don't know why. Like, they have all of these incredible B-list, mostly like TV stars, right? Taissa Farmiga, what's her name from Vampire Diaries. They have the guy that voices Terry in Solar Opposites. I love him. They have Adam Devine, our boy from Modern Family and Pitch Perfect. Like, it's such a good cast. And they manage to misuse every single one of them. Like, they don't play up each of these people to their strengths, their comedic strengths. So I find that really weird. Oh my god, and also the guy that plays Kato in The Hunger Games. God, it's such an incredible cast. Oh, it's so good. I don't know what it is, but something about like the rose flavoring, it's like this really delicate, lightly sweet sort of flavoring in there. Like, it's not just sugar. I don't know what it is, but it's so good. But regardless of the misuse of the amazing cast, it's still a movie that I will probably continue to revisit like every other year or so. It's an enjoyable and entertaining time, you know? It's kind of like No Hard Feelings, where regardless of a lot of the comedy not really working, I'm still entertained. I also rewatched the entirety of the Insidious franchise, so don't need to go too much into that because I'm also going to be releasing a deep dive in the next like week or week and a half. The plan is that I'm going to release a deep dive into the franchise of the first 4 films, and then I will release a solo review of Insidious the Red Door. So you can expect that in, let's give it like 10 days. Let's give it around that. But upon my rewatch, I was very interested to find that I enjoy Insidious Part 1 the most. I used to think that Insidious 2 was the superior film of the franchise. I thought that it was the most interesting, with the most interesting backstory of the antagonist of the film. I always thought that it was so wonderful how it kind of was interwoven with the first movie. The second film had always just impressed me so much, and now I do think that I enjoyed the first movie the most. I ended up giving the first and second movies 4 stars each though, but I don't know. I don't know. I think the second movie would be more like a 3.75, a 3.8 or something, which like that's just so arbitrary. Like, I forget I said that, but I was bummed to find out that I really just am not a super big fan of chapter 3 and 4. Chapter 4 is definitely a lot better. I love the backstory of Elise. Like, there's so much that you learn about her, and she's truly at the center of that film. In chapter 3, you do kind of like learn a little bit more about her. She's a little bit more at the forefront, but Quinn is still the main character. I love the fact that she is the main character of part 4. I want to see more older heroines in horror movies and movies in general, because when I'm that age, I'm gonna want to have people that look like me, that when I watch movies, I can relate to them. Her being in her 70s, and now also she's gonna be starring in Insidious the Red Door, like, that is so fucking fantastic. I think she's 79 now, right? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So I do like chapter 4 more than 3. 3, I remember scaring me the most. Out of all the Insidious movies that I saw in theaters, which would be 2, 3, and 4, I remember part 3 scaring me the absolute most. And then watching it this time, like, it just didn't really do anything for me. I think also when it came out, the whole grief as a metaphor thing had not been so overdone. So now watching it back with, all the movie knowledge I have now, it does kind of take away a lot of the importance of some of those characters' struggles, like moving through grief and stuff, because I'm like, oh my god, I've seen this so many times now. It just feels so painfully generic. But I mean, a lot of people are in agreement with me. Like, most people I think rated it lower than I did, which was 2.5 stars. But even so I don't know. I feel kind of bad because I love Lee Whannell as a director so much. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really hoping that The Red Door is better. We'll find out. Anyway, I also rewatched the entirety of the It franchise, but I'm not gonna get into that because I released a massive deep dive this last month. It is in fact the longest video I've ever posted to my channel. It's an hour and 33 minutes long, and I did a deep dive of the book and all 3 films, or the miniseries plus the 2 films, however you want to see them. And I also did a live stream with my dad, which was an entire spoiler chat on the franchise, so you can check those out. Same can be said for Carrie. I also did a spoiler chat of that with my dad, and I hosted a watch along, so you can go find that old live stream and watch it along with me if you'd like to. Finally, for the last rewatch of the month, that would be Happy Death Day, which came out, when was that, like 2017? You probably already know the synopsis of this movie, but it follows Tree as she wakes up again and again on the morning of her birthday. She's being attacked by a mysterious assailant, so it becomes a whodunit as she dies over and over trying to figure out who killed her. This movie, yet again, is a dark comedy that I didn't really find funny, and yet I find it super entertaining. I just love it as a movie. I think that it's a really fun little mystery, even when you know who the killer is. It's fun to know that in retrospect and like pick up on all the little cues. It's sort of like a Scream movie in that way, where it doesn't necessarily lose its rewatchability when you know who the killer is. I didn't love it as much as I did when I first saw it in theaters, but that was 6 years ago. Like, that's crazy. I had not rewatched it since somehow. But because my birthday is coming up soon, I was thinking maybe we would cover that movie plus Happy Death Day to You in a live stream spoiler chat with my dad, because he has never seen those movies and I really want to rewatch the sequel now too. But it was fun. The only thing that I noticed this time around different to last time is, oh my god, the only note that I have this time around that's probably different to when I first watched it is I noticed how low the bar is for Tree. I think this is something that a lot of people have commented on, so forgive me, but this was the first time that I noticed. There's a part in the movie when she realizes that she didn't end up sleeping with, what's his name? Carter, yes, okay, so she realizes that when she was basically like passed out drunk that he didn't take advantage of her, and when she learns this, they're like sitting there at the cafe and he's like, I didn't take advantage of you, and she's like, wow. Like, they have this whole flirty moment and she's so taken aback and impressed that this man, like, didn't take advantage of her. That's the bare minimum, okay? I know it doesn't feel that way, ladies, okay? My straight ladies out there. I know that feels like it might be a good thing, worthy of praise even, with the standards we've kind of been raised to have. That's the bare minimum. That's like below the bare minimum, is just him respecting your bodily autonomy. So the fact that in a 2017 film, there's this part where she's like, oh my god, you didn't me? That's so romantic. It makes me sick. It makes me sick. So that's really one of my only complaints, and I don't know. It's a 4 out of 5 star movie for me. A lot of the comedy doesn't really work. It's kind of childish, but it is a PG-13 movie, right? So I think it's geared more towards the teen audience anyway. But that being said, that moment really should not be in there, because what are we teaching our young girls? Have higher standards, ladies. Have higher standards. Okay, let's move on to all of my new watches of old horror movies, starting with The Turning. I received this in the mail from, I think, Horror Pack. Yes, this was in a Horror Pack box just a few months ago. So not the best month for a Horror Pack, obviously. This is an adaptation of Turning of the Screw. You might have forgotten that this movie came out literally in 2020, like pretty recently, but it's been so forgotten because it was so bad, and I just was really curious. I was like, is this as bad as everyone says? Now I have it on Blu-ray, so I guess I can find out. And it is. It really is just as bad as everyone says. It was a 1 out of 5 star movie for me. I couldn't believe it. I thought that Finn Wolfhard had like one of the best agents in Hollywood, and I was wrong. It was just so bizarre. So much about it was just like this weird kind of fever dream feeling. And the ending, like maybe the whole movie leading up to that could have been like a 2.5 star, maybe. Like, that's generous, okay? Because the movie is really dry and generic, but the ending is so stupid. stupid. Not to mention, also on my Blu-ray copy, I watched the alternate ending. They shot more than one ending, and it was equally as bad. They were kind of just screwed either way. Like, it was terrible. It was so bad. So now I'm all aboard the anti-hype train. I'm so psyched to join the hater club of this movie. And the same can be said for The Fanatic, which would be my next watch, but my relationship to this movie is a lot more complicated, I think. The Fanatic is about John Travolta's character who suffers some sort of mental illness. I think he's supposed to be like autistic, and he has an obsession with his favorite movie star who is played by Devon Sawa. So the movie is spent with him as he's like stalking him basically. And this is one of the worst movies ever made, but like kind of in the best way. I mean, I think I still only gave it 1 star because I think that laughing at that movie is probably gonna end up being one of the reasons why I'm sent to hell. Because like I said, John Travolta is trying to portray this autistic character, and I don't know who told him that was a good idea. It feels like a pretty insensitive take on that kind of subject matter. I don't know why this movie was written, but if you have kind of like a dark sense of humor, you're gonna end up laughing at all the worst parts of this movie. Cause I always say this, sometimes you have to laugh or you're gonna start crying. Like sometimes things are just so deeply fucked up that you have to laugh. So it's not really so much like laughing at situations of the movie. It's not like you're laughing at this character. It's laughing at the fact that you are watching John Travolta playing this character and that this was actually written. So you'll find a lot of reviews on Letterboxd of people saying like, this is the worst movie ever made and I love it. This is the best bad movie ever made, things like that. And I'm kind of on board with that. Like I actually could probably see myself rewatching this in the future. So good thing that Horror Pack sent that one out a few months back. I tried to kind of prioritize some of the movies from Horror Pack that I've been meaning to watch, because I do try to like keep my collection not pristine, that's not the word, but I try not to let my collection outgrow my space. So I am kind of trying to like carefully curate all the movies I own. So I was trying to like watch through some of the stuff that was on my watch list, but I don't think that I can get rid of that one. I'll probably end up giving away The Turning because I would hope that I would never want to waste my time again on that movie, and that would probably make it easier for myself if I just removed it, you know, remove the temptation. But The Fanatic, I think I'm gonna keep that one just because I feel like it's also probably like a rare bit of physical media to get your hands on, like a movie that bad. I mean, surely they're not really gonna keep producing it, right? So anyways, yeah, that's a wild movie. I can't really like in good faith recommend it, but if you've been on the hunt for like just one of the worst movies ever made, give it a go. Okay, the next new watch of an old horror movie would be Inside, the French extremity body horror pregnancy movie. This is one that I watched during a watch along on my channel. I think I'm gonna start hosting those way more often because they're so much fun, but those always get demonetized. So if you come on those live streams, a little tip couldn't hurt. That would help me out a little bit, because I have no plans to stop doing those. They're way too fun, but I also don't want to lose the revenue. So whenever those do end up getting taken down though, because the one that I did for The Hills Have Eyes ended up getting blocked completely from my channel. So whenever that happens, I will repost them to my Patreon, because on Patreon, typically they're a lot more lenient with stuff like that. So if you want to become a patron, that is also listed down below. But Inside, that was a really fun one to watch along with a little crowd with the live stream. It kind of felt like a little slumber party. And I don't know if that's why the movie wasn't that hard for me to watch. It might be a factor, but it wasn't really as bad as I thought it was going to be. I realized I didn't mention, but it's about this pregnant woman that gets stalked by this other woman that breaks into her home. And there's not really any story to it. Like I can see why when it came out in 2007, it was like the craziest thing since sliced bread. I can understand why it would sort of have like an Exorcist effect where people are like, oh my god, this is the most horrible thing I've ever seen. But at this point, having seen a lot of other crazy body horror movies, having seen like the Terrifier movies, I think I'm just a little bit desensitized to it. Like the ending is really horrible, and of course there were parts that I didn't really want to look at because they were really gross, but nothing about it was worse than what I had imagined, you know? And I typically, like historically, have not been great with body horror, but I kind of was like fine with this one. I think it definitely does help to be watching along with other people because we're kind of all reacting together, and the community experience makes it a lot less terrifying, but it just wasn't really really what I thought it was. And so I think that for the next sort of fundraising live stream, like me watching a movie for my Nope list, it'll probably be Martyrs, which, by the way, that's a fundraising thing that I've been doing. I've been watching movies that I said that I would never watch. Inside was one of them, and Martyrs is another. I've been doing that in an effort to fundraise for my short film, which I brought up earlier. And it works because sometimes I will also have alcohol with me, and the more you guys tip, the more that I will drink. You guys got me kind of drunk on the last one, but it is for cinema. It is for my art, so I will do it again. Anyways, haven't talked about the movie that much, but I don't really have that much to say about it. Like, there's not really that much of a story there. I didn't really feel that invested. I think it was made solely for the purpose of the gore, but whenever that kind of action wasn't happening, I did feel like the movie was kind of just treading water. Like, there was nothing about the movie that kept it like pushing forward. Like, there wasn't really enough of a story there. I think on the live stream explained that French Extremity is about exploring both extremes, so it's kind of supposed to be slow and boring when it's not being wild and gory. I don't know how true that is, because I've heard that Martyrs is like a very plot-rich movie, and it's very like philosophical and stuff while also being really gory. So I don't know if I really believe that. I think that might have just been someone that really liked Inside that, you know, maybe was a little hurt that I didn't really like it. Regardless, that movie, not really for me. I don't think I would ever rewatch it, just like solely because I didn't find it that interesting. Up next would be Bit. This was a movie that I watched to kind of celebrate Pride Month. Bit follows a transgender girl who is on summer vacation in Los Angeles when she comes upon this lesbian cult of vampires. And basically their whole thing is they prowl the streets for predatory men. So this movie, some parts of it are amazing. Some parts of it are so awesome, and while I'm watching it, I'm like, this is such a vibe. And then it's so non-committal to those things. It reminded me a lot of First Kill, if you guys saw the first season of that show that got canceled like immediately by Netflix. Fuck you, Netflix. I will never forgive you for that. But the tone of it really reminded me of First Kill, where like there's these really good scenes that feel like so raw and real and like super gay, and you're like, oh, me. And then like the low production value and everything just kind of like puts you off, and like you kind of have this back and forth. So Bit was the same way, where like there's certain moments that I'm like, oh my god, whoever made this gets it. And then it would like start to really drag, and then it was also not committed to its messaging. Like the whole movie, you think that this movie has a really good grasp on what it means to be a woman. Like I think the vampirism and stuff is kind of like a metaphor for welcoming this trans girl into the world of womanhood. And then they really fumble the bag at the ending, I have to say. And this is maybe like a little bit spoilery, but whatever, because I just don't want you to get your hopes up if you're going into it thinking it's one thing, because then it ends up kind of being another. Like at the end, they kind of like erase a lot of the work they did in the movie by going, well, but not all men. And it's like, I just don't know really who that's helping here. It's directed by a man, so I guess that's probably why the story ended up going that route. Because it's like this dude wanted to make the movie to be like, listen, I hear you. Like, I get it. I see the struggle. Like, being a woman seems really hard. I get all these issues, but I'm telling this story. So obviously not all of us are bad. And like, that's the note that it ends on. And it's like, we don't need to qualify with that. Men that are like true allies don't really feel the need to tell you that they're an ally. Like, they just work with their actions, you know? So that was a really weird kind of stamp they put on the ending to like retread all the work they did in this movie. And then a lot of the messaging just becomes really unclear. It's very strange. So I don't know if I'd revisit the movie. Maybe I would, because a lot of the scenes do slap. A lot of them I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this hard. But I also just like don't want to feel let down again. Oh, and speaking of being let down, okay, the next movie that I watched is David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. Yes. So this one I actually ended up giving an entire review over on Patreon this month, and I talked about it for I think like 14 minutes straight or something like that. But the crux of that whole video was basically that like I did not understand what was going on. I unfortunately really did not enjoy that movie, even though I know that everyone loves it. Like pretty much everyone that I follow on Letterboxd had given it 4.5 or 5 stars. But it also does seem like a good amount of those people people didn't end up falling in love with it until their second or third viewing. And that often happens to me with a lot of classic horror films. Like when I rewatched Carrie this month, I finally fell in love with it after never really being a fan of it. So I do look forward to my rewatches of it, going in kind of knowing some of the theories and stuff about the movie. I can kind of frame it from a different perspective, and hopefully that will help it to hold my attention a little bit more, because I'll be honest, a lot of that movie I did find kind of boring. Like, it just did not really hold my attention for pretty much like any amount of the runtime, because it's also a very, very long movie. So I just was not really able to kind of like strap myself in, but eventually I will try again. I do want to try to find it on physical media because I think that it's only available to rent online. I rented it for like $4, and I'm just not gonna keep doing that, you know, trying to understand a movie that I don't like. So whenever I find it on physical media, which I'm sure I will eventually because I have great secondhand shops around me, whenever that happens, whenever the time is right, I will find it and I'll give it another go. I also watched a short film this month called Transfigure that was actually kind of interesting and got me a little bit interested in this filmmaker. So it's just about this girl that starts to Photoshop a picture of herself, and then what she does on the computer starts to happen to her as well. And it's fine. Like, there's not really any story there. It's, I think, kind of a short film that was crafted to show off this filmmaker's abilities with like VFX, which aren't great, but like for just a short film on YouTube, I thought that they were pretty incredible. And I have not checked out anything else on their channel as of yet, but I just thought that I should bring attention to it because for a short on YouTube, I think it has no business being as good as it is. It's just a fun little short. I recommend it. The last new watch of an old horror movie, as I've already mentioned, would be The Hills Have Eyes. Oh god, it's 11:30. I am drinking this too late. I'm gonna be up tonight. Ooh, okay, so I better finish it now then. The drama. Ugh. So The Hills Have Eyes remake, I did this on a watch along, and like I said, that one got blocked. So you can find that, the full length of the watch along, on Patreon now if you'd like to join. That's only $5 a month for the lowest tier to get bonus content. But yeah, I did not like that movie. I know a lot of people have said that it's like one of the best remakes ever made. I know that Wes Craven was an executive producer on it, and that might be true just in terms of the movie that they were remaking. I mean, the original Hills Have Eyes had like no budget. It's very gritty. So this was probably the better version of it. I mean, I have seen the original, but I really did not like the original. I think I gave that one star. And the remake, I gave 2 stars because yes, a lot of the effects are really well done. I think the practical effects are superb. There's a lot of violence, and I think that gore hounds would have a good time with it. But it was on my nope list for a reason. There is an entire scene in the movie that I couldn't watch, and in fact, I was on the watch along stream just like, okay, all right, when is this gonna be over? So I don't think that it's one that I'm gonna watch again. Maybe I would watch the sequel in a watch along in an effort to fundraise. I might do that. Oh, and that was the watch along where you guys got me drunk. So that was a fun one. But it was just entirely too long with still no plot, really. Just like a bunch of horror scenes all strung together. I don't really understand the praise for this one beyond, yes, it is a better version of the original. And yes, Derek Mears, of course, is doing some wonderful badass creature acting in it, so I appreciate that. I actually really, really liked the opening of it. I thought that it was like this sort of Tarantino-esque, like ultra-violent scene, and it was really fun. And then none of the rest of the movie lived up to that. I think it's very bold for the opening scene of your movie to be the best part of it, and then never make it that good for the rest of the runtime. So yeah, that remake is just not for me. Now, as far as new releases go, there has just been nothing going on. Like, the world of horror is so dry right now. Even with the video on demand releases and stuff, I wanted to try to check some of those out because I just want to look for any of the diamonds in the rough. Somehow that kind of got away from me this month, and also just because I've not really heard anything about any of the on-demand movies. So the only 2 new releases I have to talk about are The Boogeyman and The Blackening, and then I also decided to include Sanctuary in this section because no, it's not a horror movie. It's more of like a drama thriller, but it's very, very psychosexual and so therefore very psychological. I loved it. Like, it's the best movie I've seen all year, so I just decided to include it in the best section of this video. But typically, there will be those diamond in the roughs that, you know, critics have gotten early screeners of so they can talk about it and hype it up for on-demand horror movies, and no one is talking about anything. So I've had a couple on my list that released this year that I've been meaning to check out, like Spoonful of Sugar on Shudder. There is the Japanese remake of Cube. There are movies like The Unheard and Consecration, but nobody is talking about them at all. And so I'm like, okay, I guess I need to be the one to check them out and see if they're any good. But if the critics with early screeners are, you know, making cricket noises about them, then what's the point? I kind of feel at a loss, but let's just get into these last few movies of the month. So the Boogeyman, I actually posted like a 30-minute long video or so with my dad over on Patreon. We did a spoiler-free section and then a spoiler section of that video, just talking all things the Boogeyman and Stephen King. We had a nice long discussion about that, so you can check that out on Patreon. I ended up doing that over there because I just did not like the movie enough to give it a solo review on my channel. It just didn't really feel worth it. Because this is one thing about me, I do not like doing reviews of movies that I don't like. The only time that I will do that is when it is a major franchise movie and it's a review that I know that a lot of people would want to see. So for instance, I had to do that with Spiral and with Halloween Ends. The Boogeyman is nowhere near as bad as Spiral and Halloween Ends, but it wasn't good. I think I gave it 2.5 out of 5, but I think the main issue is that I am just not the target audience. That movie I think is made for like middle schoolers to high schoolers maybe. It's the type of movie that was released, you know, right at the top of June for all the kids that just got out of school for the summer. It's somewhere where they can go and they can hang out without their parents. It gives them something to do. So I think they were very strategic with how they released it and with the ratings they gave it and like, you know, down to how the movie was made. Because it's a very, very, very generic horror movie. I mean, down to the title, right? The Boogeyman. It's also so generic in terms of the subject matter. It's another metaphor for grief. Oh, the Boogeyman symbolizes depression. Wow, how profound. And this wouldn't be a problem, but like for me, when I was a teenager, the types of movies that got me into horror were like Insidious and The Conjuring, which now so many movies have copied them that a lot of that probably feels generic at this point. But I was pretty impressed upon my rewatch of Insidious at just how original that concept was. And for not having a drop of blood, for being PG-13, how truly terrifying that movie is. Or at least how terrifying it was when I was a teenager. And honestly, through probably until I was like 21, that movie still scared me a lot. So all of that to say, I just feel like kids today deserve better. They shouldn't have to get, you know, the Walmart brand version of the Babadook in terms of what they can go and see with their friends. They deserve to have this generation's version of Insidious, like PG-13 horror movies that are actually good and original and frightening. Now, if I was a teenager, I probably would have loved The Boogeyman. I probably would have thought that it was a lot better. I think that it's also pretty similar to Insidious Chapter 3, so it's not bad by any means. It's just a very, very generic movie that is entirely held together by Sophie Thatcher's performance. But she deserves better than The Boogeyman, and I think the better is coming her way, so yay. Now, moving on to The Blackening, I did actually give this one a solo review on my channel, so you can check that out. That video is about 20 minutes long, but there are no spoilers in that, and I can't really get into spoilers here because this is a monthly recap video, so I'm not going to do that. But I highly recommend checking out that review because I get into a little history lesson of Juneteenth. I feature a lot of interviews with the creators and the cast of that movie, and it's doing really well in theaters, it seems. Like, it's already far surpassed its budget. I think it's already made like 2 or 3 times its budget of $5 million, so you love to see it. And unfortunately, I won't be talking about that one, but we do have another very, very special movie to talk about today. Sanctuary is up next. This is the final movie that I'll talk about today, and I'm sorry that it's not really a horror movie, but there just was not that much to talk about in terms of new releases. Sanctuary is about this man who has just been promoted to the CEO of his company, and now he is trying to break up with his dominatrix. This movie is literally perfect. I gave this a perfect score. It's the first movie of the entire year that I gave a perfect score. I was born to watch this film. This movie, I cannot explain to you how much this movie was made for people like me. This movie is made for all the little freaks out there, of which I am one. It is so unbelievably well written. The dialogue of this movie, everything that came out of these people's mouths, I was just like, yes. The acting performances, like, I don't think you understand the type of actor that it takes to sell something like this. This is a movie where, because the subject matter is so sexual and so psychological, it takes a very specific kind of person, and it takes a very specific kind of pairing to really emulate that kind of chemistry. And these actors, I'm like, give them their Oscars, give them their flowers, because it was incredible. The entire movie takes place in one location, and the whole thing hinges on their dialogue on these two people. And the amount of twists and turns that it takes, like multiple per act. Every time that you think the movie is going in one way, it zags. It keeps you on your toes the entire time. Like, I just was constantly surprised. I was constantly so sucked in and entertained. I was just so incredibly taken by this movie. This and Across the Spider-Verse were finally the first movies of the year that made me be like, okay, this year is not a total loss. I truly cannot recommend it enough, but it is going to be for a very specific audience. So you know who you are, like, just judging by the synopsis and kind of what I've said, I think that you can kind of tell whether or not the movie's gonna be for you. So just go in with the right expectation, you know? Is it gonna be a movie for you? And if it's not, then maybe don't check it out. But I'm obsessed with it. I really hope that they do a physical release of it, because oh my god, it's currently sitting at my favorite movie of the year. So I don't know if anything is gonna top it. And with that, I think that I have rattled on enough about that. I wanted to save the best for last. Please, for the love of God, let me know what movies that I should put on my watch list for this month, especially new horror releases, because this year has been so dry. I don't know how many times I've said that. I'm so looking forward to the rest of summer. This is gonna be a movie summer. Not necessarily a horror movie summer, unfortunately, but there's a lot of really good stuff it looks like coming out in July. I'm so excited for Talk to Me, especially. Oh, so that one's on the list, as well as a couple of other theatrical releases. But yeah, seriously, let me know about any other on-demand horror movies you want me to watch, and any movies in general, you know? I'm open. Let me know. And then we're also about to get into spooky season, so things will pick up. I do have faith. That will do it for today's video, though. So I've kind of already given my entire spiel as far as what you need to look for in the description box, but just to give you a little refresher, if you would like to watch my last short horror film that I released, if you would like to donate to my upcoming short horror film, if you would like to become a patron and get bonus content, all of that is linked down below. And of course, here are my lovely patrons' names. If you also would like to be credited as a producer of this channel, because that's what you are. Because another thing that I do on Patreon also is, like, I give updates on my content. You guys kind of get like behind the scenes into what I'm doing with my short film, because I do also use some of the Patreon money to fund my short horror films. So you guys become privy to kind of all the like behind the scenes knowledge of the stuff that I'm working on. And it just really helps me because, you know, it kind of helps hold me accountable to the projects that I'm working on, you know, having people to keep updated. And I just like, you know, keeping people in the loop, keeping people involved in my projects. So a massive thank you to them for keeping the lights on this channel on the days when I am not going live, when I'm not posting a video. You know, they really help supplement my income. So we love them. Mwah, 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 mwah. I guess the last thing that I didn't mention is that all the rest of my social media can be found down below. Those are also great places to follow me if you want to stay up to date with the stuff that I'm working on, especially on my Instagram. You will always know whenever I'm going to be going live. I keep you guys really in the loop over there. More than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye!